Welcome to this podcast of Our Taboo Museum, where we can talk about anything. I'm Laura Mappin, founder of Our Taboo Museum, and I'll be your host today as we discuss consanguinamory, which is love between blood relatives. Consanguine means blood relative, and amory means love. It's also called incest, which is also sexual activity between relatives. But incest also encompasses sexual activity that is non-consensual or involving a minor, this is key. So incest and consanguinamory have been around as long as there have been humans, and in my experience it seems that these topics are much more difficult for people to discuss than gay relationships were 50 years ago, which is what prompted me to have this discussion. Today we'll first start with an interview of a person who's delved deep into this topic. And given my time investigating taboo subjects across the board, I'll offer a few of my own, and then we'll open up to discussion at that point. Okay, so let's get started. My guest interviewee today is Diane Rinella, author of several novels involving characters in consanguinamorous relationships. Now, as I understand it, you were just living your life, not opening up taboo museums, not specifically trying to become a spokesperson for any particular social issue, and yet something made you pick up this topic and run with it. Do you want to tell us how that happened?
Sure. Well, first, I kind of like to give the disclaimer, even though you've already done this, that anytime I talk about this type of relationship, I am talking about consenting adults only. And we all know that incest is an ugly word, and sometimes it's tied to molestation and child abuse. We're not discussing that here today, and if anybody wants to discuss the tie-in, that's fine, but please be clear that that's the path you're going down, because the path I'm going down is adult consensual. But yeah, I was bored one morning, and I love 60s counterculture films, and this new box set of 5 had come out, and I'd never heard of them, and I popped one in, and it was this film called The Buttercup Chain, and it starts off with 2 first cousins being born via identical twin mothers, and that makes them genetic half-siblings, but legally they're first cousins. And one of the moms dies, and they wind up growing up together. So this happens, like, if you don't pick up on it in the first, 5 seconds, you're going to miss it. But they wind up growing up together, and they obviously have this bond, like a soulmate type bond. And then we see them as young adults, and the movie progresses, and they have this relationship that they refuse to act on. And it's so obviously there, and they watch each other go off with other people, and they try to fight this, and the girl's pretty accepting, and the guy just freaks out, and you never know why, because they just don't take it where it needs to go. So at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, the guy's heartbroken and won't act, and the girl's heartbroken and will act, and they part. And I sat there going, this is ridiculous. You so needed to draw this out. You needed to just go down there, and you had the scene where they start kissing, and you think it's going to happen, and no, he chickens out. I'm like, what is the problem? Why can't we go there? And so I tracked down the very obscure novel, thinking, well, maybe it went there, and it didn't. So I got really angry that no one seemed to have the balls to take it where it needed to go. So I sat down in front of my computer and said, I got time on my hands, and I always told myself I'd write a novel. What the heck? And before I knew it, I had Love's Forbidden Flower drafted.
You had what?
Love's Forbidden Flower. It's my first novel. Sounds like a 70s made-for-TV movie, doesn't it?
Did you ever track down the author, or?
I never thought to actually track the author down. No.
Find out why they did
but,
it that way.
And it could have been the author, and I should do that, because it also could have been the publisher said, we need to cut this. Because when I went to publish, I was trying to do the traditional publishing path, and I got a lot of responses to my inquiry going, oh, the writing is great, this sounds like a wonderful story, but you've got to change the fact that they're blood relatives. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, just don't make them related at all. I'm like, well, then it's not a story. Like, the whole point is that this is something that shouldn't be happening in a lot of people's eyes. And if I take that away, it's your standard romance novel. So I self-published.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of like we're crossing paths. You're coming at this particular subject that really moved you, and I'm coming at it across a bunch. You went deep down one subject, and I'm going across a bunch for the reason that anytime I find out about some people having to live, or a person having to live a life of in secret, just because the rest of society says it's not okay, when it really is okay and no one is harmed by it, that just gets me like that movie got you. So we've crossed paths that way. And at this point, I was going to read something from the fullmarriageequality.tumblr.com blog. Somebody asked a question and he answered it perfectly, which I think it covers like what moves us to stand up for these people, because we're not this person and yet we're giving them voice. So the question asks, I hope this doesn't sound weird, and I'm sure you get asked all the time, but why are you for incestuous consanguinamory relationships and marriages? Every example I've ever heard has come from a background of abuse or perhaps neglect from parents to have exposure to the outside world. I want to understand, though. I want to understand in what context you believe this is okay and not abusive, and why you believe that it should be fought for. And his answer is, and there are a number of links to background stories that support his answer, I am tired of people killing themselves or getting murdered by their families. It sickens me when our society cares more about punishing nonconformity than helping the victims of real abuse. Our society is far too prurient. When people celebrate gay men getting married, no one seems to get all that confused about the lack of equivalency with adult men sexually abusing young boys. But if the two are half-siblings, suddenly it gets extremely confusing for people. It's totally legal to return to your hometown after college and marry your old teacher. But if you have sex with a woman who never raised you, but who happened to have carried you for 9 months, suddenly you're a sex offender. None of that sounds sane to me. So, there's a number of ways that these people have to live, which we'll get into in a bit, of what that, and plus, what sense does it make? This is making no sense. So, I know you've written a couple other books. Would you like to just kind of flesh out the books that you have at this point?
The Diane Rinella repertoire?
Yes.
Well, the first one's Love Forbidden Flower, which is the one we're talking about. Then there's the sequel, Times Forbidden Flower. I did an erotica novella using the characters because a lot of the fans of the series are erotica fans, and they really wanted that story. So for a very short time that was available. And this year I released something completely non-controversial. I even cut the swearing out of it, called Scary Modsters and Creepy Freaks. And the title of it is a play on a David Bowie album. And it is a modster, not mobster. And we're looking at the 1960s mods out of England. And one of our main characters is a dead 60s rock star. And it's his story and the story of a girl who buys one of his albums and winds up summoning him back from the dead. And it's a tale of soulmates, and it involves some really obscure theories on soulmates. And I'll leave it at that because that's a huge spoiler if I go there.
But there's no consanguinamory in it.
No, it's as normal as you can get. It's PG-13 only because there is talk of vibrators in it. But it doesn't go down that road other than the jokes.
Okay.
Sounds like it could be a good TV show.
There you go. Yeah, I think it would make a great chick flick. And the latest book I'm working on is called Something to Dream On. And it's going to be ready soon, but I think I'm going to release it in 2015. And again, nice and normal.
When did you first publish Love's Urban Flower?
2012. October 2012.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we'll have links to your website and your books.
Okay.
We'll add those there. So, moving back to the consanguinamory part of this talk, maybe you can give us some examples of like how does this happen? I know there's a variety of ways it happens. Maybe you can give us some ideas of, just to get us thinking about just how common this can be and how it can seem very normal and easy to happen.
Well, there's a lot of different answers to that. How does any relationship happen? Sometimes relationships just happen. You could know someone for years, and then one day suddenly see them through a different set of eyes and go, oh my God, how did I miss being around you all these years and just not seeing that you're the person I'm supposed to be with? That happens all the time in society. Some of these relationships form because in the case of siblings, they're raised together and they grew up very comfortable around each other. Maybe they experimented together and they've built this comfort level where they trust each other more than they trust anybody else, whether it's sexually or emotionally, with their deepest, darkest secrets. So that's another factor. Another really common way, and potentially I believe the most common way, is genetic sexual attraction. And that's where, like in the case of siblings, they may share both parents, they may share one parent, but they are not raised around each other and they meet later in life. And the theory is, and studies have shown time and again, we are attracted to people who in some way resemble ourselves. So therefore, logically, it makes sense that if you meet someone who has similar qualities to you, you're going to be attracted to them. And sometimes they meet later in life knowing they're related. And there's many stories, many famous stories about couples who meet, fall in love, go to get their marriage licenses, and then find out they share a parent. Or there was an adoption and they share a parent. A lot of famous stories. In fact, there's a couple in, I think it was Wales a couple years ago, where they went to go get married, went to get the marriage license, found out, and all their friends who had been supportive of their relationship for years, thinking this was the greatest thing in the world, said, you two need to break up. The families came down on them, the friends came down on them, and broke them apart. Because, they tried to fight it, and I believe they actually did wind up breaking up, because they had so much pressure, and so many people were down on them, that, what do? Suddenly everybody's against you. And how heartbreaking is that to you? You have all the support, you're so happy, you found this person you're going to spend forever with, and then because you make this discovery, everybody now thinks that this is horrible and you can't do it, even if you're okay with it. It's pretty earth-shattering.
Well, and given that there's a couple reasons why, the one thing that probably comes to mind is why people are against it is, there's a couple birth defects, right? That might be the main thing that keeps people.
To me, that's the main excuse people use, and I can back that up statistically. So if you're hearing this, don't come unglued. Okay, yeah, we go down the birth defect road, but there's also something called the Western mark effect, and that is the concept that humans are inclined to prevent other people from behaving in ways that they don't deem to be right. An example would be right-handed people try to influence left-handed people to adapt to a right-handed world. It's a very simple way of putting it. When it comes to these relationships, it's a matter of, I don't think it's right, so you shouldn't. There's also the theory that we are genetically predisposed, that when we grow up around someone, we feel that is not the relationship that we pursue. Your brother is your brother. Your brother is not your lover, which goes against genetic sexual attraction. So try to figure that one out. But as far as birth defects go, and this one kind of punched me in the stomach when I really thought about it. And Harold, I'm going to read statistics here so I can get them right. Children of unrelated parents have a 3 to 4% risk of having a serious birth defect. Offspring from first cousins have about a 4 to 7% chance. The risk for the closest relationship possible, which is a parent-child, is 9%. Now, it's really easy to say only 9% because 9% is a really low number, but when you're talking about a life, that's scary. But if I ask you what would you think that number is, usually the response I get is, it's like 50%, right? No, it's not. The media has been guiding you down a wrong path. So now, with all this, the odds for siblings are 7 to 9%. Now, we are watching society change, and women are having children later in life. It is not at all uncommon for a woman in her 40s to have children now. So when you look at the sibling birth defect rate, so among siblings, 7 to 9%. Childbearing is, for a woman over 40, it's 6 to 8%. So it's only slightly higher for siblings than it is for women over 40. The last I saw, nobody is trying to talk women over 40 to stop reproducing. There are no laws being put into effect. We are not saying women over 40 need to be sterilized or go on birth control. We are not saying women over 40 can't marry because they might reproduce. So where do we draw the line? To me, the birth defect argument is completely invalid. Now, I will add that I don't think you should ever run the risk of trying to conceive a child if you think that there's a very strong chance of there being birth defects. So I'm not just saying, oh, go ahead and have kids and take the risk. What I am saying is you need to learn the statistics, because if you're going to support women over 40 having children, you can't then look at siblings and go, no, you can't do that because of birth defects. You know, pick your argument. Now, when it comes to children, if you're the product of siblings or the product of, like, your mom is your mom, but your dad is also your grandfather, there's a stigma attached. That's not the child's fault. And we as society need to respect that. So if you meet a child or hear of a child who has parents who are genetically related, we as society need to respect that child. It is not the child's fault. No matter how you feel about that relationship, let the child be.
Well, and as we get more comfortable with consanguineous relationships, that will come too. So I was trying to get back at the Wales couple, and what was the response from those people? What was that strong response coming from? And I guess it can be a number of different things. Sometimes we don't even really know. We just know that we have this knee-jerk reaction against it, and we just can't support it. And then when we start to question it, it's like, well, that a lot of times people will say, well, birth defects, and then you just went through the stats that shows, that doesn't really back it up. In fact, I know I've heard this. I don't know what the afflictions are, what the issues are, but I know there are some times where both parents have the recessive gene of something or other, and there's a 75% chance or 100% chance of their baby having that, and they still get pregnant. There's no law against them having a baby, and that's way out of...
Yeah, way beyond 9%.
Mm-hmm. And that's
sometimes it's 100%.
Yeah.
75%.
And that's something any couple could get tested for. So if we're going to make birth defect arguments, then let's take every couple before they reproduce and have them go through that test.
Right. So there are a couple other reasons why people might be against it, and one, I wonder if what we can say about there might be an aspect of disgust about this. Is there anything more to say about that?
Well, it all comes down to, do you believe in equal rights or don't you? Because if you believe in equal rights, disgust doesn't matter to you. I think eating snails is disgusting, but I don't pick at restaurants. I just don't eat it. My husband eats them in front of me all the time. Fine. I just get all squeamish on the inside. I'm not going to stop him. I'm not going to tell him he can't order them. That's his body, his choice. So if I believe in equality, I have to support everyone. And that's what it really came down to me. When I wrote this book, I really didn't realize how heavy the stigma was. I didn't realize we couldn't talk about this. To me, it was just another thing. Maybe it's, coming from San Francisco and we seem to talk about everything. But I was really shocked once I got out there and started talking to people, seeing the expressions on their faces, hearing the fear in their voice. Friends that I had known for years suddenly were looking at me strangely. I had no clue at all. And it really comes down to, what do you believe in? And I think we all need to question that. And it's funny, the other night I was watching the True Blood series finale, and they're going to do this big thing about equality, right? And the writers are tying it into homosexuality, vampire marrying a human, and the supporting all love. And I was sitting back going, I wonder if the writers realize how I am taking this, because I do support all love. Are they really thinking this one through? So ask yourself that. I mean, maybe you've got this equal rights bumper sticker on your car, or I support marriage equality bumper sticker on your car. It's like, do you really? Just at least ask yourself that. And if the answer is no, ask why not. Challenge yourself with that. And if you don't, you don't. But at least give yourself the opportunity to see that exists in the world. This type of love exists. And whether or not we agree to it, whether or not we support it, it's there. And so if you believe in love, by extension, you got to believe in this.
So some of what probably motivates some people is the laws against it, which, as we were talking earlier, there may be laws against other things, but how do I say this? You don't have to. You can investigate and discuss the law before you do it. For example, assisted suicide. We can discuss the law, but we're discussing it. We haven't committed it. We haven't gotten involved with it, or at least the person who wants to do this. In this case, if somebody's involved and they start talking about it, they're revealing something about themselves that makes it really hard for people to have a voice who this would impact the most, which I'll just say, in the world that I live in, those kind of things just bug me to no end. I have to give voice to that. So let's talk about the laws, as if you want to cover the laws
Sure.
Towards us.
This is a great time for me to give one of my disclaimers. I am not an expert. I have never been involved in one of these types of relationships. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you, because I don't want to spend 14 years in jail under California law. It's that type of situation. It's that sticky of a situation. It sounds like an exaggeration, but it's really true. Sometimes just talking about it, admitting you have done it, will get you tossed into jail. Now, in California, like I said, we're looking at roughly 14 years for incest. However you want to define incest. But let's talk about some of the other states. Now, this is coming off of Wikipedia, so you can cite their references. But there are some states that if you are convicted of incest, be it rape or between consenting adults, the sentence is life imprisonment. Life. Okay? Now I'm going to look at some of those states, and I'm going to tell you what the possible sentences are for first-degree murder. So, Alabama, for incest, no matter how it's defined, you're looking at a life sentence. But for first-degree murder, death penalty, life without parole, or life with parole in 25 years. So it is possible you could commit murder and be out in 25 years. Now, in Louisiana, again, for incest, you're looking at a life sentence. For first-degree murder, it's a mandatory sentencing of 15 to 50 years. So 15 years later, you could be out on the street. But if you have consensual sex with a relative, we're never going to see you again. And there's, I believe, 8 states that have similar laws like that. Now, in Alabama, which we have a life sentence for consensual relationships with a relative, the highest penalty for rape is life or 10 to 99 years. So theoretically, you could serve 10 years for rape in Alabama and a life sentence for consensual sex. I don't get that. How is it that if I'm walking down the street, somebody can come up, rape me, and ruin my outlook on life, ruin my outlook on my body, destroy part of my soul, and get 10 years? But if I choose to have a relationship with someone, I can be tossed in the pokey for life.
And this is no kids. This is just
adult.
having,
we're talking
yeah,
consensual adult versus rape.
Consensual adults and not procreating, not having kids. That's
yeah,
what I mean.
it's just the act of it.
Yes.
There's a case going on right now that just hit in Georgia that's all over the news about a brother and sister. Now, I find flaws on this on a lot of levels, and it has nothing to do with their relationship. They were allegedly in a trailer in a church parking lot having sex. Somebody had said, oh, we think there's a prowler, and the cops came out to try to find the prowler. They found these two walking around, and the guy said, you know, I'm walking her home, and that's that. Somehow from there, and I'm not finding this somehow in the media, the cops deduced that the two had just had sex, and so now they're in jail. So I can only guess, and again, guess is the operative word here, that potentially they confessed to this. And my advice to anyone out there in these types of relationships is, man, if the cops are at your door, deny, deny, deny. Because that's what you have to do, because that's what the laws make you do. Even if you want to tell the world, you have to deny. Or else be ready to go to jail. That's sad, because I know couples out there who want to be open, who say, you know what, I don't care what my friends say, I'll be open, but I'm not going to jail because I'm open. So how are we going to grow as a society if we can't talk about it? Yeah, that's the one.
It's from the New York Daily News, interesting.
Yeah.
Georgia siblings charged with incest had sex 3 times after watching The Notebook.
Yeah.
I guess the movie was too much for them.
You know, I love how the media spins things. You know, it's incredible.
So I was going to save this point for later, but I'm going to bring it up now since you brought this story up. And the hardest part I have about this and many other things is trying to deduce whether it was consensual or not. And I've been in a number of situations myself, whether it's I'm seeing something that looks like child abuse and I can't tell, or I was at Folsom Street helping a friend with her booth, and I'm 2 doors down from the kink booth, and I see a woman get off of the stage from doing an act, and her face looks like she's near death, like she's so scared or something. And I'm thinking, and several of us were watching, like, does she need help? I mean, if she wasn't there voluntarily, I would jump in and help. If she's there voluntarily, totally fine. I can't tell the difference. And what burns me here, and I do want this to be known, is like, sometimes it's really hard for people to tell if it was consensual. And when I was 16, when I was 18, when I was 20, we are talking adults here, when I was 18 to 20, 25, I mean, I could share some stories here. I shake my head at what I was doing, and you would have said it was consensual, but it really wasn't. We're not really, I don't know what to do about, I don't even know if there's an answer, but I think that's the part about this issue that gets me the most, because often it's hard to tell whether it's consensual or not. And I would want to help if it wasn't consensual. I would absolutely want to support him if it was consensual, and I just can't tell.
But it's no different than anything else.
That's right.
Like, let's look at, okay, because everybody's read 50 Shades of Grey for some crazy reason. Let's look at that book. In there, yay, we have
Guys,
a situation
not so much.
where a woman's making a choice. Well, a lot of people have read it. We all know what the story is about, right?
Yes.
So you have somebody in there who's making a choice. And that's how she chooses to live her life. Now, there's times when she regrets it. There's times when she embraces it. It's her decision. Now, if she's out in the street screaming rape, screaming abuse, oh yeah, we should be there in a heartbeat to help her. The amount of times we see people on the street screaming for help and we don't stop to help, I mean, that just happens all the time. I just can't get my head around how people can walk away and let people suffer like that. But if you suspect somebody is in some type of relationship where they may need help, I feel it's your duty as a human to ask if they need help. But it is their duty to respond the way they feel is truly best. If they need help, they need to say yes. And if they don't, whether they do or they don't, that was their decision, and you have to assume they're telling you the truth. You can't, we have to respect people's privacy. We can't put our noses in other people's business. But also, if I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, I really need help, and I'm too afraid to say something, as much as I'm kind of hoping somebody's going to come through and grab me and pull me out of the muck, it's up to me to say something, because what if I really don't want you to help me? What if I really am fine, and I know if you get closer, you're going to expose the secret, and I'm going to wind up in jail? Mm-hmm. So it comes down to respecting your fellow man. You know, it all comes down to being a good person. Do you believe in equality or don't? Do you respect somebody or don't you? Treat people with respect the way you'd want to be treated, and just let everybody be. And if we could do that, the world would be such a better place.
You know, that is a good answer. And what I like about heading in this direction is that the more we can talk about all these issues, whether it's sexual abuse, child abuse of any sort, rape, anything that's non-consensual, the more we're going to get these out in the open and be able to tell. And people are going to learn to be able to ask for help. So I'm going to take that. I really like how you put it. Yes, that's right. Okay, so we're going to soon get to the discussion part of this. And right before we do, I just want to make a note of a few other taboo subjects that are similar to this. I'm trying to show, you know, given other taboo subjects, we are, as a society, you know, we are working through other things, and we're a little bit farther along the path with other topics. For example, sexual activity between any two people, that can be non-consensual or involving a minor, and those are issues that we are not looking to change, and yet we are also we are on the adult consensual end of those, as sex worker, as kink, and LGBTQ issues. We're looking to make those healthy and acceptable. So consanguinamory is just another version of that, as I see it, with the taboo work I've done. And another issue to relate is non-accidental death or murder. Now, most murders, we would say, you know, should not be permitted and should still be illegal. But some people are working towards having something to do with assisted suicide, trying to make assisted suicide legal and find ways to do that in a healthy way. So that's non-accidental death, but it's consenting with adults, and that's again another issue along a certain spectrum that has a bad side and a good side, if you will, or illegal and a trying to make legal side. So consanguinamory is not alone in this. And the only other thing I'll mention here before we go to the discussion part is people come out consanguinamorous on occasion in certain countries when it's safe to do so. I don't know anybody myself in the United States who might do that, and given the laws around here, I would be surprised if anyone did. But people come out other things as well, including gay, lesbian, transgender, as well as atheist. So, and there may be a few more flavors of those, but basically these are all ways of being in the world that have had pressures on them that were unnecessary and had nothing to do with that person. That society has to work to give them freedom to live the way that they're living, since they're not causing any harm. And with that, shall we open it up for discussion?
You've scared them all. They're all cowering.
I would like to know what your take is on the laws that you were referring to,
Yeah.
and how that came about. Imagine these guys sitting in Biloxi or something and deciding what law are we going to create? Okay, murder. Let's make that 10 years, and let's, you know, who would be on either side of that to make it such that?
Yeah, you know, I can't get my head around that to save my life. It just doesn't make sense. And this is personal opinion, I don't know, but the only thing that makes any sense at all to me is that the people making the laws were so filled with hate that they just said, oh, that's disgusting, and said, life. You go away for life if you do that, because you're just gross. It's a guess.
With murder?
But yeah, with murder, you would think, oh, well, there's probably a reason if you killed that guy. You know, maybe you have your reasons, but, oh, you had sex with your sister. Oh, that's gross.
There's no reason
ever for that.
a little bit of an irony in that sometimes, things change socially because, for example, we know, all of us know somebody who's gay. I think that's my theory is that that's why it's become much more acceptable now, to change, and some of the things that we're not as familiar with, like there's nobody in the family or something, that we're not changing. But that doesn't explain the law thing, because you think, my God, somebody knows somebody, old Uncle George or something, and you don't think, well, old Uncle George is a murderer, I don't know. I just have a hard time really figuring out why they would make the laws like that.
Well, it might blow your mind a little bit here on this one. Chances are you know a lot of people who have been in these types of relationship, because the statistic is 10 to 15% of all college-age adults have had some type of relationship with a sibling.
Can you define that? Or what level? Is it
early adults?
kissing,
It depends. It'll range from experiment to molestation could be a part of that. We were bored. We find each other attractive. Pretty much any way you can define it fits into that statistic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I read a really interesting story today. I'm going to try to get it right, about a family whose grandmother had just passed away. And when they were going through her paperwork, they found their grandparents were never legally married. And as they kept digging through their family tree, they found their grandfather was also their great-great-uncle. It was the grandmother's uncle she married. And so they couldn't get married. And they just told everybody they were. And so the family kind of went, oh my God, what does this mean to us? And the response I read was beautiful. And I think this was on Marriage Equality Blogspot. If not, it was on Final Manifesto. Those two are like the best websites to go to if you really want to learn more. But the response was, well, was your grandmother happy? Was your family happy? It sounds like you all grew up in a happy home. So that means you were lucky. And it really comes down to that. I mean, we have, and oh gosh, I'm going to try, this is one I always tongue twist myself onto. In my second novel, my main character, Lily, goes on a rant about relationships and genes and what we're told, and how we are told that if a child is adopted, it's as much their own as if this was a blood relative. But yet, wait a minute, in some states, adopted children can marry because they're not really related. They just need to go prove that they're not really related. So it's such a mixed message. So do genes matter or don't they? So there's a lot of things to ask yourself when it comes to stuff like this. And I'm sorry, I totally got off on a tangent on what you were saying.
That was interesting. You said 10 to 15% of college age.
That's the statistic. Yeah, you can find that on Wikipedia.
Well, then that answers another whole
sources.
question. That is, why is this important? And I'm making it more of a rhetorical question, but why is it important to discuss it and all that? I mean, that really brings it out.
Well, it's important to discuss it because things never change unless they get discussed. This will not change unless it gets discussed. These laws will not change unless it gets discussed. The people in these relationships can't discuss it because they'll go to jail. Because if they come out and say, whether it's to their families, their best friends, to society, anytime they say, I had sex with insert relative here that is closer related than a second cousin, there's a chance that they're going to jail. Because you never know who you can trust. So it's up to us to have the conversation.
And I need to follow up on that, and I'm sorry for dominating the questions here, but by the way, I want to point out that in immigration right now, people say, hey, I'm illegal. It's kind of interesting. They passed the bar already, and there are some really brave people saying it because they are going to get deported, potentially. Yeah. That is kind of a brave thing for them to do. And I just lost what I was trying to think about. It was coming out and talking about it. What about lack? That's it. What about lack of knowledge, a priori? I mean, what if you don't know that? Are you committing a crime? You accidentally have sex with. You can't get married because it'll be found out, perhaps. But what if you accidentally have sex with your sister and you didn't know that?
It's technically still a crime.
You can both go to jail. Huh? Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
what about after the fact?
As the lawyer, but
yeah,
I mean, a crime's a crime, right? Like if you accidentally deal drugs, you could still go to jail.
There's an article in the paper today
so.
about a corporation, and they're saying, and I'm not going to. It's in the New York Times about. Well, the corporation is not liable because it was just some of the lower level people, and that. But you know, if you're on the other hand, if you're driving your boyfriend and he goes in and robs the 7-Eleven, you go to jail,
exactly.
even if you didn't know it. I'm saying so. Knowledge of the crime is not necessarily the predicate decision maker.
Well, and I wondered, your last point of that, you said that's the reason we should talk about this is because it happens 10 to 15%
10 to
15%
young adults.
It's just going on. I mean, in my book, anything that's happening, we should be talking about. We should know that it happens, and not necessarily to shut it down, but to just for good health. I mean, just
Is there an advocacy organization or not?
Not that I know of. There's a couple of fantastic websites.
Yes.
Right, but I think the reason we don't know about it, sort of example is this case.
Right.
There's no indication that someone's coming to their defense to advocate that it's wrong to be, looking at that as to overturn the law. So it's not out there. So most people's reaction is what they have been raised and know, and there's no information. This is the first I've ever heard of this subject. Or any effort, if you can consider that an effort, which I don't consider it an effort. Like you said, there's no organization yet.
Right.
So it's a taboo, and I think most people will have it. I think the biggest one in my mind is this thing about inbreeding. And I was reading the Wikipedia article on inbreeding, and it talks about the European monarchs and and how it affected them, and and I think a lot of the laws, they were probably written a long time ago. Okay, and the knowledge of all of this stuff that may have come from that. I don't know if it did or not, but so I think inbreeding is the primary motivation for why it's bad. Okay, we don't want to have that happen. So another concern that I have from researching this is the comment about comparing it to women over 40. And one of the articles that I looked at, I don't remember if it was through your link or I found it on my own, but it kind of went over, women over 40 or 35, different categories. It wasn't a strict 6 to 8%. It depended, So, for example, I think Down syndrome for women over 40, the number is way higher. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with, this situation. Another thought that I have on that is that you would hope that women over 40, if they're doing it on purpose, and I think a lot of older women that have children it's an accident. It happens. It wasn't planned. But if they are planning it, they've taken their hopefully and taken the risks into consideration. So when we talk about consenting adults, what's the line? Okay, and most relationships, are younger people who especially with siblings who grew up together, that maybe once they become adults, now they can, do this legally. They don't have as much life experience, and maybe if they have the same kind of risks, are they really going to investigate it to the same extent? I don't know. I also wonder about the folks that were against same-sex marriage. They one of their arguments was it's a slippery slope, right? If you allow this, so this would be, if this came out, right? If there were an advocacy organization, all of these guys would come out of the woods and see, we told you so, okay? You allowed all of this gay marriage stuff. Now look at, okay? What's next? With animals? They had that argument before, so there's a lot of.
They still have it.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah, absolutely,
do.
absolutely. But and personally, I had thoughts, about cousins, but I never acted on it or anything like that. And so I agree, it's kind of a net.
Did she?
What was that? No, she never turned me down because I never said anything about it. Several cousins, they were good-looking young women. Back when I was young.
Laura doesn't like this, but boys think about this
all the time.
A lot.
Yeah, Absolutely.
I mean, really lot.
Whether you're related or not, you know.
Gotta tell you, it's a real truth. Yeah. And
Right.
so that's just the way it is.
That's
I mean, that's, yeah.
But going back to what you were saying, I think I can kind of answer something for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people who are in these relationships know the risks. And they are no less intelligent than anyone else. They understand birth control.
Sure.
They use birth control. They understand what will happen if they have kids, not just the risk of birth defects. They know about the social stigma. And most of them just flat out say, you know what, we're just not going to have kids. We're just not going to do it no
Sure.
matter how much we want. Some still have them. And of the ones that I know,
Right.
off the top of my head, I can think of 5 offspring, and I've heard rumblings that one may have some issues. That they're finding later on there may be a developmental issue.
That's not statistically significant, I have to tell you.
1 out of 5?
Exactly.
From my
When-
math
yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah, so
that's 20%.
But really, what it
But-
comes down to, if you're going to say
Right.
2 people can't get married because of the birth defect rate, how many kids are born by parents who aren't married? How many one-night stands wind up in
Oh,
kids
sure.
being conceived?
How many are forced through
Yeah.
rape to have
Oh,
it?
sure.
Exactly. You know,
And with these rates, that we're not thinking about preventing certain other groups of not procreating, not having kids. So whatever we do, it should be cleaner across the board.
exactly. I know couples who either have gotten married or are getting married, and they're just not going to have kids because that's not their thing. And that's cool. But why is it then okay for them to get married and people who want to get married who share genes can't? It doesn't make sense. And the people who share genes, it's not exactly like they could control that. So why don't we let people get married? Why don't we just let people be happy?
And I'd like to bring up something that is just totally, very much an opinion. That is that some of the morals and laws that we struggle under, if you will, are religious, right? They come from a long time ago, and some of them are kind of like with practical aspects to it. Don't kill a neighbor or something. Things I don't know. And the incest one, I think, is one of those.
I looked it up in the Skeptic's Annotated Bible.
Right.
And it turns out that incest was okay for Lot.
Oh, I see.
But it's not okay for anybody else.
Yeah.
It just turns out. Leviticus has a bunch of...
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
given that it might be coming from these kind of like semi-social, semi-moral, semi-religious
Right.
mores,
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
there might have been more of a reason, say, back in a time when you're living in tribes. I'm willing to bet, and now again, I've just made this a total opinion, I'm willing to bet that consensual relationships that were ancestral, like by the second generation, we might be getting up to 10, 15, 20% possibilities. I'm just guessing about that. They might magnify the more you have it. And that might be really something you want to avoid in an insular tribal situation in the Middle East, when you're, and that's the only tribes there are, I mean, I'm just guessing that maybe this is the genesis.
And that would
no
make
pun
sense.
intended for some reasons.
No, and that would make sense. But when we look at the modern day United States,
Right. Yeah.
to me, it's just discrimination at this point.
You've been interested in this a lot more than I have. Have you looked into historically what attitudes were, how they changed, how much it's specific culture related, what ill effects there were possibly anywhere it was more accepted?
A little bit. It's really hard sometimes to find solid information that you feel is reliable. And when I wrote my second book, the sequel, I actually tried to do some research in that because I was going back in their past lives together. They have this huge past life history. And I was working on researching, these things were playing in my head. Were they always brother and sister? And when wouldn't their relationship have been taboo? And definitely, if you go back to ancient Egypt, it's common all over the place that you would marry within your family to keep the wealth. Same with, in England. So you have these pockets where it's like, oh, well, we accept it because it was okay to keep the money in the family. But even then, it's still, I couldn't find anything that, and maybe I just missed it, which is entirely possible, that really came down and said, okay, here's all the times in history it was fine, and here's all the cultures.
Well, this article on inbreeding in Wikipedia, it talks about the Habsburgs. The House of Habsburg was infamous for its inbreeding. The Habsburg lip cited as an ill effect. Also, in ancient Egypt, royal women carried the bloodlines, and so it was advantageous for a pharaoh to marry his sister or half-sister. So, and there's also discussions here about certain islands in the Pacific or whatnot where there's a limited, population, and so inbreeding happens. And it's a very interesting article, and it goes through a lot of aspects of this whole.
That would seem to be more common in my mind, like say the Eskimo.
And not only humans, but they're also talking about other species as well.
Well, America's now becoming more and more mobile, but it's not very long ago that we were not very mobile.
Sure.
I graduated in a small high school class of around 30. There are probably 2 or 3 of us who live outside the county. So going back to what you've looked at, where there were limits, but okay, we had the chart here showing degrees of relationship. Where there's fairly well-defined limits, it's okay just so it's not within this degree of closeness. How are you? First cousins, no. Second cousins, okay.
Are you talking about in modern times?
In that chart.
No, either.
Okay.
Currently or
now,
in history.
If you look at the United States right now, about half of the states in the Union will allow first cousin marriages and half won't.
Really?
And I think every state allows second cousin marriages.
Really?
So second cousin seems to be the cutoff. I think, and don't quote me on that one because there's a reason why I have a cheat sheet for my statistics.
So there's another line like somewhere like this.
Yeah.
What do you attribute the bias then if it's not
Inbreeding.
well-being of
The modern day bias?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's power of suggestion. We're told to believe something, so we do. I think, George Orwell said something to the effect of, people believe what the media wants them to believe. And if I asked you before today, what do you think the birth defect rate would be of a product of 2 siblings? What would you have guessed it to be?
I would probably have said, I don't know.
And then when I say, 7 to 9%, did that sound low to you?
No, it really didn't.
Okay.
Because I had no idea at all.
Okay.
And I don't know what it would be for, as women get older, or as men, the sperm donor gets older. There's also effects.
Yeah.
So it isn't just for the female.
Right.
Yeah.
But what the statistics are, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But this doesn't seem to me like something that's tied to possible defects of a child that's born in the union.
No,
I think
because
the other
these
side
laws
of it-
came into effect before we understood genetics.
Well, yes, that's true. Well, I guess it's going back, again, the Habsburgs, we're talking about hundreds of years ago. And, it was considered to be okay back then, at least by the monarchy, right? And those are the guys who were writing the laws, I suppose, right? It wasn't the common, serfs. But I think the other thing right now is more, at least when you normally hear a story, this situation here in Georgia seems to be atypical. The one you normally hear is that, there's this incestuous relationship which is abusive, right? And the kid doesn't say anything because she's afraid, or he is afraid, and the mom didn't protect you, and all of these kinds of, it's a bad thing, and that's kind of how it's ingrained in our minds when we hear these things. Okay, that's the only thing we really hear. We don't hear what you've portraying. It's not out there. Now your book might be getting it out there in some small way, but it seems to me that the chances of this happening are really, really, really slim. Right? To change the laws.
Yeah.
It's just a huge hurdle to overcome this stuff, and there's nobody out there, like you said, for reasons
Think
to.
about the few years ago with gays, things, with the,
And I would find it. I would wonder, in terms of the percentage of the population that are gay versus the percentage of the population that are involved or would be involved in these kinds of relationships. It doesn't, one would think that the number would be much smaller. Okay, you don't hear about it.
Another kind of question then. What kind of things do you? I can see the issue, as far as I'm concerned, is bias against persons who have a relationship between, in this part of the scale, close relatives of whatever degree. What do you see as an effective way to address that bias in society? Number one, and then number two, the legal aspects of it and having any effect there.
Well, going to number two first, the legal aspects. I mean, look at the struggles we're having today. Homosexuality is more accepted now than probably ever. And yet we still can't get marriage laws passed in some areas. And yet we just heard another story about parents kicking their kids out because of it. So the legal hurdles are vast. And the only way we can ever possibly consider getting those laws to change is if we as society go, you know what, we are going to respect these relationships. The problem is people in consanguinamorous relationships can't say thank you for respecting me because somebody may then throw them in jail. So that is going to be an ongoing battle. Honestly, I'm hoping that everybody steps back and goes, what do I really believe in? Do I believe in equality or don't I? I think I do. And just look at it. And I'm not asking you to buy into it. That's your decision. But I'm hoping that when we leave here today, everybody steps back and goes, what do I really believe in? And maybe somebody else's relationship just isn't my business and I let it go. Or maybe it's really okay that people have their relationships. Or, still can't deal with it. Not for me. But hopefully, if you say it's not for me, you're still okay going, you know what? I'm not going to support you, but I'm not going to deny you. And I think once we start changing that way as a society, only then are the laws going to get looked at. Because in the meantime, nobody's going to bother with these laws. They just look at it as incest laws, and incest is an ugly word, and people think abuse. And I get it. But really, it's going to come down to us as people.
I have a suggestion. Rather than looking at it as this particular issue, if you considered it to be a consenting adult issue, regardless in several of the situations that you're mentioning, and actually, if maybe even leveraging the huge machinery of the same-sex movement. That and I think that the same-sex movement is making tremendous progress. There's still a lot of problems, obviously, but it's going in the right direction, and it's going a lot quicker than most people ever imagined it would be. So maybe if there's a generic movement that basically says anything between consenting adults ought to be keep the government out of our bedrooms, as it were, regardless. Okay, that goes for sex workers and LGBT and in this situation. And if you were able to get a Supreme Court, that felt that way, then maybe you could actually get those laws, all the laws that were related to the consenting adults.
And there is kind of a grassroots movement going on. One of the two websites we keep mentioning, Marriage Equality Blogspot.
Right.
If you go on Facebook, there's a group called I Support Full Marriage Equality. And they're behind that. And it's for anyone who just says, you know what, treat people as equals, let everybody be.
Right.
And you can go and join that group.
Unless there's some reason, and nobody, they would have to then prove, and you could probably, use science to disprove their perceived problem, right? The situation with inbreeding, okay?
But this website, say it again, what their purpose was?
There's a lot of different websites out there that offer support. There are a couple that really advocate, and the one that's really formed an advocate group is called Marriage Equality Blogspot. And
let me stop you there. Is their purpose then, does they consciously have in mind consanguinary relationships? I get
hard word.
you did good.
I've given up.
That's a tough one. Oh, okay. You know what? I'll tell you. I'll tell you an alternative in a second once I finish the question.
Earlier today, I had it down pat.
I blow it all the time.
Yeah, it's fleeting for me.
So,
but this is a conscious effort.
it's a conscious effort to support all people and all consenting adults in their relationships, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's consanguinamorous, whether it's polyamorous. People are people, people are equals, all relationships are equal as long as you're adult and consenting. And so if you go to their Facebook page, that's what you're there for. And then as far as saying consanguinamorous, I'm going to plug myself here a little bit.
Okay.
One of the biggest compliments I ever got was this marriage equality group coined the phrase friend of Lily after my main character Lily. And if you've heard the term friend of Dorothy,
Right.
referring to homosexuals, so instead of saying consanguinamorous, we say he or she is a friend of Dorothy, or I'm talking about the friends of Dorothy. And it's a lot easier to say. It's still a mouthful, but it's a lot easier to say, and it's one of the high points of my life to have that compliment paid to me.
Well,
So, Friends of Lily comes from your book, then?
Yes,
Okay.
my main character is
you
Lily.
almost never hear anyone talk about we're working for equality of homosexuals.
Right.
You know, it's just not used. It's either gay or lesbian, and or sometimes gay in a more to include males and females. This one needs some word smithing there to get something that's easier.
Yeah.
And by the way, talking about nomenclature and names, you know, my psychiatrist, hey, how's that? Good. Okay, see, you got another boundary, right?
Bragging again, you get
You know, when you're going through a divorce, the two kids, the youngest one's about 8 or so, and they all were directed to have counseling, you know, psychiatric counseling. And the two older ones I got right away, they're 7 and 9 years old. And the younger one's going, what about me? You know, and this is, I had to say that's a very Palo Alto answer. Like, you know, all his buddies got him.
That's the 60s. That's the 60s.
It's my parents that need the psychiatrist. Why are you sending us?
So this happened quite a while ago in group therapy and stuff. And I had this situation where I'd be making, jokes, if you will, gay jokes. All right, whatever a gay joke is. Okay, and I felt I could do that for a number of reasons. I am straight, but I felt completely comfortable with that without going into it. And the psychiatrist was going, why do you need to do that? You know, I really had to do some self-searching. You know, and I realized, well, there's something wrong with it now. You know, that it looked semi-seriously and joking, and we'd go out to dance at the stud or something, and I could ask to dance more than my wife would, you know. And if I got pinched, I'd go, no, you know, I'm a breeder, you know. But, you know, I felt comfortable doing that, and yet it was wrong to make the jokes, okay? And the thing is, I make jokes about, he moved out of Tennessee, so he, you know, for the chance to date outside the family. You know, stuff
that's
like
true.
See, I know. I feel now. You see, I feel guilty about it. I'm trying to restudying it here. But you know, it is interesting that we do that.
I'm feeling really,
No, I'm bringing out how we are socially. I mean, look, I don't feel that I have any of these.
How much time have you spent in Tennessee?
Or what is it? Years? It would take years of outbreeding for the British royal family to become smarter than a
Should we have some genetic testing going on here?
But you see how unreasonable those jokes are. They really are. I mean, there's no place for them, and yet I feel that I'm pretty liberal about. Liberal is the wrong word, but you know,
Yeah.
open. Yeah. I don't have these biases, but I'm still telling the jokes.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know?
It's a cultural thing, right?
It
You
is.
still have a psychiatrist number?
I had another
She
thought.
abandoned me after a while.
Had another thought about where this may come from. Oedipus, right? You know, that's an old story, right? But
Yes.
it's the basis of all this kind of stuff, the Oedipus complex and all of that stuff, you know. So
Yeah, we should call it the Jocasta complex. I wanted to ask you something else. People are contacting you. You don't have to divulge anything, but I'm just curious. You start writing about it,
Yes.
and is the next process that people then contact you?
It's yes.
How
It's
exciting.
been pretty amazing. I do occasionally get letters that are cryptically worded. It's kind of interesting because I have, a Facebook fan page, and then on my Facebook page, I have opened it up to accept friend requests from pretty much anyone, because it's just something I felt I should do. And with that, sometimes you get friend requests and you're like, who is this person who lives in this country I've never heard of? But then sometimes they write to you, and you get the cryptic message, and it's like, oh, you're a friend. I get it. And that's a real honor. The thing that really got me involved in the passionate side, I wrote the book and I became passionate, but what really set it over the edge was I had gone to my blog and I had been asked so many times, why did you write this thing? And so I wrote a post about why I wrote it. And one day I was checking my blog stats, and I see this marriage equality blog spot has come, and there's hits off of that site. And I go over and trace it back, and sure enough, they've done a write-up on my write-up. And so I contact them. I'm like, hey, hi, let's talk. And, I got drawn in a little deeper and started making more and more friends. And it's been really amazing. I've had some incredible honors paid to me from people who are in relationships and trust me. I've had incredible honors paid to me in letters I get from people saying, I never thought about this subject before, and then I read your book, and oh my God, what I've been missing out on. It's not for me because my brother's gross, but oh my God, I will never look at love the same way again.
About mom or dad?
How heart touching is that to have people say you've literally changed my life, because I will never look at the world the same way again.
Do you ever get any hate mail?
I have not.
Really?
Oh, good.
And let's keep it that
Good,
way.
that's good. That's good.
An article ran on me a few months back on Examiner.com, and the writer got harassed, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And her take on it was the same as mine. You know what? And it was in private. And it's like, you know what? Are you going to step forward, or are you just kind of hiding behind it? And I think a lot of the reactions of people are just this hate that they can't explain, and they want to get it out and they don't know how, and they just kind of try to let it out in some way, shape, or form. And with me, it's come a lot. I don't get hate mail per se, but I get hate reviews. And you can sometimes,
You mean book reviews?
Yeah, so
I see.
there's been a few in some places, and I won't say where because I don't want to encourage it, but it's easier to leave reviews in some places than others, and sometimes you can read the review and go, yeah, this person genuinely did not like the book, and that's cool. But there are sometimes you go, wow.
Now, are these reviews from book reviewers or from just people?
People like anybody just
that's going to happen anyway.
Oh yeah, and I expected that.
Okay.
I expected that, and in all honesty, I am so flattered and so honored when I look at my reviews. Like if I go to Amazon and I see what my rating is, and I see how many 5-star reviews there are versus the couple of 1 stars, I never in my wildest dreams expected that the rating would be so good. I really thought that there would just be hate, and it's so flattering.
Are there other writers writing about the subject in a fictional form as you were doing?
There's one other writer who she released before me. She's a phenomenal writer, but she took it from a different point of view. So my point of view is love and acceptance and society. Hers took more the angle of the dysfunctional family, where people are thrown into the situation, because that does happen. And I've actually had some reviews where people have said, oh, I read this other book, so I thought it only happened in these dysfunctional situations. It's like, no, it happens in all these situations. But those are the only ones that I know of who really tackle it from a fiction standpoint. And of course you have like Flowers in the Attic, but that's rape, and I don't understand why people make such a big deal out of that. It barely touches on the subject. Anything else that I've read has been erotica. That's not to say it's not out there. I'm just not aware of it.
I want to follow up still. I'm really curious about this, because when you wrote the first book, You were doing it on the basis of one of a box set of movies?
Yeah, it was just this obscure countercultural film.
Right, and I'm not trying to put you on the hot seat. I mean,
can ask me
you
anything.
weren't, you said
not
not a
answer.
relationship, and you were being creative.
Yeah.
And have you gained information, I mean, knowledge from people contacting you? And
Oh, absolutely.
Wait a second, I hadn't realized that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been very blessed in that some people have confided in me and told me secrets, and a couple of them have said to me, there were some scenes in your book where I swear you were a fly on the wall in my house because this is the way it happened. And then there are some other ones that come forward and say, here's how it happened in my house. And sometimes it's pretty, and most often it's not. But it's been amazing, and that's why I take the Facebook friend request from strangers, and I just keep my privacy settings high when it comes to some things. But it's like, there's some people out there who just want to talk, and even if they won't come out and say it, they just want to know that there's somebody right there who isn't judging them.
I have an idea for you.
Yeah.
If you want to move this forward, is to create a nonfiction book. Taking the stories that you've gotten access to and probably could get more, and writing a book that's true, without naming names and all that kind of stuff. Explain it, to give the other side, right? To say that this, here are true stories that are good, that aren't the ones that we're normally hearing, so that to get a different perspective out there, since you already have some popularity, you could leverage that to.
I had thought about that, but then I looked at it going, well, I enjoy doing fiction. I don't want to be known as the incest author.
Right.
Also, going back to my friends at Marriage Equality and Final Manifesto, I know on the Marriage Equality blogspot, they have a section where it's all interviews. And it's anonymous interviews with all types of people in consanguinamorous relationships, whether they're brother and sister, half-siblings, parent-child. It's all there, and some of them are beautiful.
Sure.
They're
Is it the most
detailed,
common,
they're open
too?
for everyone.
What is the most common? I'm just kidding. Not a curiosity.
I honestly
almost.
don't know. I think, just from what I'm seeing, and I know that, my friends at these websites are going to go, Diane, you know this. Don't you read our sites? But I think it's siblings based on genetic sexual attraction where they met later in life. I think that's the big one, but I'm not sure. And I think that one's more common because you get the people who are closer in age. So that, and maybe it's just that it's more accepted, so it's sticking out in my mind more. I don't know.
You talk mostly to groups like us or groups not like us?
Honestly, I wrote a novel. And now I'm finding myself here today talking to you.
This is a start.
It's really cool. When I sat down in front of that computer, I never really thought it through. When I hit the publish button, I'm like Laura. I sat there and I thought about doing the alias and the whole bit, and it's like, what do I need to protect it and the whole thing, and it's like, what? I wrote a piece of fiction.
Yeah. Have you done?
But I didn't expect people to go, "Oh my God, it's so true."
Have you done a book thing? I mean, like at Kepler's or something? I mean,
Well, I would tend to think, other than Laura's museum, that you would have a hard time talking to a group or having a group accept you as a speaker on the subject.
It's kind of surprising because sometimes they run and hide, and some people are like, "Come here, let's talk." But 2 weeks ago, I was in Houston doing an author convention, doing some signings.
really, in Texas?
In Texas. Wow. But, I mean, it wasn't just me. There was a bunch of us.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people come up and either they've seen the cover and they want to know more, or they're like, oh, it's that book. Or it's like, oh, it's that book. Why'd you do that?
So now you're smearing Texas, too.
You want to switch? Do you see what's wrong with stereotyping? I mean, it really is.
I thought I was going to be the one in the hot seat.
I hope you realize how I do that, in a manner that's meant to point that out.
That was the point.
See, with the whole preamble, I wasn't sort of getting about why it's so difficult to talk about these things. To me,
see, that's where I was when I wrote the book.
I'm fine with it.
That's exactly where I was. I'm like, Well, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
I mean, they're soulmates. I'm watching this movie going, they're soulmates. Just let them be.
And then there is the thing that I recognize, and I'm sure we all do, and that is, okay, we might feel that way or might not, but you know who doesn't is the person and the people involved in it, and they can feel horribly different about it.
They're feeling horribly conflicted a lot of the times.
And that is something to be empathetic about.
Absolutely. I mean, how would you feel if the person of your dreams, the person you know you are connected to on so many levels, and even if you believe in past lives, you know you've had lives with them before, is sitting right next to you or grew up in the room right next door, and society says you can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. It's already hard enough when you've got a crush on someone to try to tell them, but when that person is your brother, how do you go about that? Mm-hmm. Because if he's going to reject you, that's the most horrible level of rejection. It's possible that relationship won't recover. Where's your support for that? And you can't go talk to your friends about it because they're going to judge you. You certainly can't talk to your parents about it because most parents will come unglued. You know, what do you do? And I really feel for those people. And if you talk to people in these relationships, they're like, you know what, that was the biggest hurdle, but once we got over it, it's been perfection ever since. And you just can hear the bliss in their voice. And it's like, oh, that's what we all want. Right there, you've got it.
I'm sorry to say this, but in the New York Times just 1 or 2 weeks ago, in the magazine section, the very last page, they have these one-page vignette type things. This guy's writing about a summer, like in college, and this boy comes over. I mean, and they're working and swimming at the lake, and then he goes away at the end. And you finally realize that he had, it was his coming out himself to realize that he liked the guy, you know. And then later on, the guy who's in the Navy comes back and visits, and he doesn't see him. But it's just a really poignant story about coming of age, being gay, you know. And he's just realizing it himself. He's realizing it then. And wow, what a great story! And I just was thinking, you know, I've never read anything about consanguinamity.
Friends of Lily.
Close enough. We knew which word you were trying to say you were going for.
Incest.
Yeah, that's very and please, I'm sorry. It's really important for me to get to say one other thing about consensual relationships. This is a moral and philosophical situation, problem, point of discussion, covering everything we do, including being in society, non-sexual, everything, you know, finance, economics, everything. And defining it as consensual is a legal problem, it's a moral problem. You know, if everybody didn't have any economic problems, if you will, you know, then we wouldn't have sex workers, prostitution, you know, I mean, well, we might, but then it'd be okay. You know, I'm not all for, you know, things that people are compelled, whether it's compulsion. I'm sorry, I'm being really vague about it, but it's a whole big problem. And if there's, you know, compulsion within a family, say, or something, I mean, that is a problem. And when you were discussing, well, if the person doesn't say they want help, then they don't need it. I believe that everybody should live their own lives, but I do know situations where actually you need to step in. Mental health is an excellent example.
Of course, yes.
But I'm dealing with an older woman who's 74, and she's being taken over by her son, and she thinks she doesn't have a problem, and she does have a problem, and I do know it for a fact, but there's no way to step in. I want to bring this back to this. It's just saying everybody's on their own unless they say is not exactly
I agree
the answer.
with you. There are times
it's difficult.
It's just when it comes to consanguinity, when it comes to friends of relationships, the friends of Lily, they can't talk because then they can wind up in jail.
Yes.
So it's a matter of knowing. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely times where it's like, yeah, this person clearly needs help because they can't help themselves. There's a difference between knowing somebody needs to step in to help fellow man and minding your own business. And it's recognizing, I got to run my own business on this one because it's not my relationship. Right. And who knows what's going on, but they're okay. Now, it's, you know, you're looking at something like that, that's serious older issues.
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine that. By the way, if I and my sister were the only ones left, or I can just think of situations where, well,
the odds increase as you get older.
Really? Then my odds are getting better and better.
You might want to call her and say hi.
Yeah.
No, because as you get as you get
well, you
older,
can be in love, but you don't have
spouse.
to have children.
See, there you go. Spouses die off.
Yeah.
Siblings move back in together.
They
find
happens.
comfort.
Yeah, certainly.
And sometimes, whether it's for convenience or just cause, or like, wow, how have I missed out on this part of my life? Or I trust you more than anybody, whatever the reason, just sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
You never know.
So what do you feel about, say, people who live in the burbs and are, live these relatively straight lives and whatever? What is your opinion about how they feel about things? And I'm going to then preface that with it. I pretty much am completely kind of open to the idea in the proper context.
Yeah.
Is everybody like me, or is everybody like?
No.
And where are they?
It's really interesting because I never know when I talk to somebody how they're going to react, and you can usually tell within 2 seconds where it's going to go, just by the look in their eyes.
Really?
Because some people go, "Oh, that's interesting." You can just see the genuine interest, and some people you could just feel their insides cringe with, "Okay, that's weird. I don't want to talk to you." Or some you could just see the hate build in their eyes, like, "How dare you?" And you could you watch the eyes, you watch the body language, and it's really hard. Like when I go to these book conventions and whatnot, because they go, "Oh, what's your book about?" How do I open up that one? Because, well, there's a disclaimer on it. But it's really hard because, and God love her, a good friend of mine kind of reamed me out the other day, and I deserved it. She's like, when you talk about your first book, you really need to tell people that, yes, it's taboo, but you're looking at it from this standpoint of love and handling it tastefully. And it's not like these erotica books are out there. It's not erotica. It's about the beauty of love and the power of love and what some people have to go through because they're denied that. And I'm like, you're right. She was so right. I'm like, sometimes I just don't even know how to sell my own book because I don't know what reactions are going to be like.
I was thinking in other societies, right, there are prohibitions having to do with religion. Right, a Muslim and a Jew, and there are, several, relationships like that. But in certain sects, right, you can be killed for doing that, right? So there's, prohibitions against love in many different aspects.
Thanks. Sure.
I think we're mostly talking about, consenting adults and doing away with laws. In addition, other laws that, have, marijuana laws or prostitution laws, which. If you get rid of those laws, all sorts of great benefits to society occur, right? And, undoing all the bad things that are happening because of those laws. And in this case as well, people have healthier lives if they didn't have these laws to burden them for these religious edicts, which are the same kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this conversation helps move things, at least open things up for more conversation. More people can hear this that might not be in a place where, we live in this area where we could find a number of us to meet and have this conversation. There are lots of people that they might be listening to this by themselves and they might have to go hundreds of miles to find another person who could actually sit down and have this conversation. So let's hope that this helps more people at least think about it.
I think Tennessee and Texas are both better than that. You could find somebody in the same block probably if you just raise the question.
Really?
I do.
They'd be willing to talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay. I
I've lived in a lot of places that are easier to disparage, and there's always somebody.
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's a Sunday Assembly TV show. It was CNN. What's his name? Morgan Spurlock, where he was actually giving a Sunday Assembly talk in Nashville. You know, and there's all, you know, it's a heart of the Bible Belt, you know, and to have a Sunday assembly in Nashville was kind of, you know, even mentioned in the show, you know, very surprising. But like you say, there are good people everywhere, right?
Well, then may I mention that a few years back, 15 years ago, we moved down to San Jose, in the name towns, and it was so surprising to find the social family mores as different as they were. And I won't go into real details. I mean, but it was just strikingly different from being here where I live now, and my kids kind of realized that when we moved back here. We're only talking 20 miles down the road, you know, surprisingly different, and you know, I can expand.
And there's different pockets of San Jose too.
There are different parts. We were in Willow Glen, which I thought was beautiful.
And I was in Willow Glen.
Palo Alto.
Sure, there are in Palo Alto. Absolutely, all of it. I will tell you what the other parents let their kids watch was Speed, the movie, but they wouldn't let them watch anything where there was a little bit more than kissing. And I was just the opposite. I'm going, you know, I don't see anything wrong with this. But I didn't think that was appropriate for the 10-year-olds on the bus going to Fresno. No,
right.
That was, you know, watching Speed. You know,
movies with more than kissing.
They're out there. You really got to be brave. It's just funny how and these were, you know, reasonable people, and I just thought that their way of looking at things was different. And up here, I just had much more of what I felt. So it's everywhere, and it's just a couple miles away of having a different attitude. I hope I'm not oversimplifying, as I did with.
How did you know I once lived in San
Jose? Again, wrong one.
And I even lived in Willow Glen. So.
Yeah.
But I didn't find that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe my experience comes from I typically talk about lots of taboo stuff in quite, I don't want to say detail all the time, but I live here in that area, you know, and it's hard to find people who can do it. And that is my experience, even in this area that is, you know, the San Francisco Bay Area, which is pretty open. This place barely holds that. I mean, well, it's also very hard to just sort of start talking about it, you know. But still, I think that it's pockets. It's not that easy. And this was particularly difficult. I think this topic, from my experience, this was particularly difficult to find people who are okay with it. I hit a lot of people who were not okay in various ways and shapes and forms.
How would you put it in context with polyamorosity? Did I get that one in close?
I don't have a friends of term for that one.
Oh,
we'll have to work on that one.
And the reason I'm asking is because I know here, and it's, you know, but I know a lot of friends that have no idea that their neighbors next door and
swingers,
that they're all over. Yeah, but it's different than Bob, Carol, Ted, and Alice.
Well,
you know,
there's a lot of different aspects.
And I have lots of well-intentioned, intelligent friends who have no idea that again, bring people on the block and you know.
Well, it's open marriage, right? You know, that's a concept, and how does that fit in, right? You know, I don't even know if there are laws against open marriage. It's consenting adult situation, really.
It's just people having sex.
As long as they're not related.
Whatever.
Yeah, as long as they're not related. Right.
As long as they don't share any genes.
Or they're not the same sex.
Yeah. And the thing about it being just two,
actually open marriage with bisexual couples.
That's an amazing arbitrary concept, isn't it?
Interesting.
It's really amazing. Oh, wait. Oh, we can get married.
Depends on what state you're in, though.
There's certain positions that are legal, regardless of that.
That was one of the first things brought up was Georgia. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's where we've heard about, them looking in the window to see the two gay guys, and it's sodomy up there again. Oh, wow. What? Crazy. So do you find more of an openness in San Francisco, per se, than the San Francisco Bay Area? Both of you, either of you.
It's hit and miss. It really is. It really comes down to, it's a person-by-person thing. I can't even say a community-by-community or a lifestyle-by-lifestyle. It really varies.
I have to agree. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although I have found, as far as readership goes, people who read erotica are more likely to read my book. And I think that's because they are more open to a lot of concepts. than people who don't.
So where's Amazon's shipping your books?
Mostly in the United States, quite a few in the UK. There's been Italy, India, Australia.
We know about the distribution within the U.S.
That I don't know. Yeah, they don't tell us that I'm aware of.
That might be.
That would be very interesting.
They probably have the data.
They probably do.
So friends of mine who are naturists, as we nudists as we grew up, and you got the magazines and stuff. It's amazing. You go down to Jamaica and a couple of places that are there, and down there, my friends come back and say, "Oh yeah, there's a minister's family from St. Louis," or but they can't be there. They can't, but the whole family is down there. And that I'm pretty sure is fairly common. The pockets. Individuals, as you were saying.
So how did you know my dad was a preacher?
That too, and Jamaica was the other one I didn't know.
You guys.
You do mention that.
Los Gatos.
Good oil,
Up in Los Gatos. Los Gatos.
Yeah, Lupin. Yeah, that's always fun.
Been there, done that, huh?
Yeah. Are you going to continue writing in this vein or in other veins, so to speak? No vampire
sequel?
No. Well, you already had it.
I already did a sequel,
and
I've definitely finished off with those characters. The next book, Something to Dream On, actually is tackling the effects on bullying when you're older in life, of bullying. If you've been bullied, how sometimes it can affect you all of your life. And sometimes there's a reason for the bullies to be a bully, but it's still not justifiable. And that's one of the themes in that one. So
wow,
not
that's so prevalent.
But it's prevalent.
Bullying is so prevalent.
It's so prevalent.
And now there's new forms of bullying, right? The online bullying.
Yeah, and that's what it came about. A friend of mine was being cyberbullied. By an adult, was being cyberbullied by another adult, and I just sat there going, "This is ridiculous," and it happens all the time online.
Right.
And for you guys who might not be aware of it, girls in middle school and high school, it's hell.
Oh yeah.
It's hell right now out there.
Girl on girl,
where they do this stuff where they shun them.
Yeah.
And my daughter, part of the reason I know this is in about 7th or 8th grade. She's in a new area and she's being introduced by this one family friend, and she was in this group, and all of a sudden she was not. And my daughter is wonderful, and there was no reason, and they wouldn't tell her why. And it's arbitrary, is what it is. It is really difficult. That's the worst form of bullying, and girls suffer it. Boys, we think we have it tough, but girls really suffer it. It's a horrible situation. Right. And it's arbitrary. It's just horrible. They do it because they can.
I'm sorry, girls were bullies when I was in the 8th grade.
They were tall too, weren't they?
Yeah, they were bigger. They were stronger.
Right. They mature fast.
They were not reticent about demonstrating.
That's interesting about the bullying. That's kind of brave of you to go where no man dare tread before.
Or woman.
Or woman. Sorry. Is there a name?
Generic
name?
Yeah, friend of who on that one?
What was the friend of Dorothy?
Friend of Dorothy.
I don't know that.
It's an old term, basically meaning that somebody is homosexual.
I mean, a friend of Judy. Is that what it comes from?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wizard of Oz. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I'm a friend of Bill. No.
You've been contributing heavily to the Democrats, or what?
That's right.
Yeah, not Hillary. No.
All right, so we're just going to put an end on this. And we can go forward after this, but let's just thank Diane for coming and sharing all you know about this. And good luck on your new book.
Thank you.
And thanks, everyone, for being a part of this discussion.
Okay.
Thank you for giving it.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's interesting.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know if you're going to say something funny. I'll keep recording.
So they're going to edit us out, right?
Yeah.
Somebody
She kept pausing it every time you talked. It's already been done.
a story in itself, right?
I was trying to wrap him like 5 times. He kept- Okay, I'm just going to let it go.